Why do we get up from the comfort of our bed to go to school or to go to work? Why do we put ourselves through 7 hours of torture to get through the day? The answer is motivation. Motives are desires, needs, or interests that arise or activate an organism to achieve a goal. There are 5 main theories of motivation: instinct theory, drive theory, arousal theory, opponent process theory, and incentive theory.
Instinct theory requires little learning. There are 3 main concepts in instinct theory: fixed action theory, which are unlearned instincts and are universal for a particular species. For example, babies suckle when they are hungry. Sign stimuli is the second one, and these are events that elicit the instinct. The final one is sociobiology, which are primary motivation to ensure survival of genes.
The drive theory is based on the principle that organisms are born with certain psychological needs and that a negative state of tension is created when those needs are not satisfied. When a need is satisfied, drive is reduced and the organism returns to a state of homeostasis. For example, when it gets too hot, an organism might sweat, or when it's too cold, it will shiver.
The arousal theory of motivation suggests that people are driven to perform actions in order to maintain an optimum level of physiological arousal. Optimum level varies with each task depending on how difficult the task is. For example, taking notes in class requires less arousal than taking a test requires.
The opponent process theory states that people are usually at a normal or baseline state, and we might perform an action to take us away from that baseline state, such as smoking a cigarette. It is commonly used to explain addictive behaviors. These acts may be initially pleasurable, such as getting the buzz of a cigarette, but is usually maladaptive to our being.
Okay, incentive theory is when one is motivated by an external goal. Organisms anticipate a desirable outcome after an action. Expectation is the key. The 3 main motivational drives are hunger, sex, and social interaction, which affect all living organisms.
According to Freud, the biological basis of human behavior is eros and thanatos. Eros is the life drive, the drive for bodily pleasure, the most powerful being sex. It is usually general altruistic and moral behaviors. Thanatos is the death drive that seeks self-destruction. According to Maslow, the hierarchy of needs motivates us the strongest, going from physiological needs to self-actualization.
Emotion is linked to motivation as well. Theories of emotion attempt to specify how emotion-provoking events and physiological arousal interact for subjective experiences. These theories include common sense, James Lange, Cannon-Bard, and two-factor theory. Common sense theory involves subjective emotional experiences that precede the physiological arousal. So in this case, if you are sad, then you cry. Common sense, right? James Lange is the complete opposite. In this case, the physiological arousal comes first, then the emotion comes. You cry, then you are sad. Walter Cannon and Philip Bard demonstrated that similar physiological changes correspond with drastically different emotional states. This suggests that biological change and cognitive awareness of the emotional state occur simultaneously. The two-factor theory explains emotional experience in a completely different way than either James Lange or Cannon-Bard. So this suggests that both our physical responses and our cognitive labels, or our mental interpretations, combine to cause any particular emotional response.
Health is also a huge part of your psychological state. About half of all mentally ill patients have significant physical illnesses. About 25% of people physically ill have serious psychological disorders. Stress is a physiological and psychological response to a condition that threatens or challenges a person and requires some form of adaptation or adjustment. Stress lowers resistance to different illnesses because of the disruption of the body's homeostasis. For example, people that are divorced are more anxious and depressed and have more medical illnesses than happily married individuals.
The social readjustment rating scale is Holmes and Ray's measure of stress, which has 43 life events from most stressful to least stressful, and each are assigned an amount of points. Optimistic disposition is the belief that optimists have better health and a greater ability to cope with stress.
There are several ways to control stress, but the best way is to have social support. It provides information and problem-solving guidance, gives care, affection, and nurturance, which helps maintain self-esteem and give encouragement and reassurance.